views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Coming up on this edition of Perspectives, we talk with a very special young lady who talks about turning her pain into purpose, how she coped with her brother being shot, and then becoming an advocate for social justice. That's coming up next on this edition of Perspectives with yours truly, Daren Jaime.
What's on your mind? Express what's on your mind. What's on your mind?
Anything relevant to life, you bring it to the table. Whether you make a move solo or a movement with a stable. No fables, you speak on your decisions. Cause in the long run, it's your voice, your views, your vision. Keeping it real with many messages for you to know. This ain't radio, but DJ runs the show. Entertainment, he rocks it. Politics, he locks it. The host with the most would handle any topic. Don't forget to share your perspective with shines of light. Cause it might make a difference in someone else's life.
Make a difference in someone's life. Express what's in your heart and your mind. Share your perspective.
What's your perspective? Let them know.
And hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Perspectives. I am Daren Jaime. And of course, we thank you for joining us. As always, you watch Perspectives every week here on BronxNet's Channel 67. We also encourage you to visit our website at bronxnet.org. And don't forget about our social media platforms at BronxNet TV. Now, if you're trying to reach me personally, what you can do is you can definitely reach out to me on Facebook. My professional page is Daren C. Jaime. And then also on Instagram as well as Twitter, you can get me at DC Jaime23. And there you can find some information and also possibly some inspiration. But coming up front and center on this show, we talk with a very special young lady, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, who actually turned her pain into purpose. Her brother shot to death by Teaneck police, and now she's turned into activism, and activism in a major way, speaking out, calling for social justice reform, criminal justice reform, and more. I'm pleased to be joined by Natasha Pannell, and she joins us here on the show. And Natasha, good to have you.
Thank you for having me.
And I want to take time and just let our viewers get a little bit more about you. And you know, you're a person that's an activist, I guess you would define yourself too, and a vocal person now in the community, and have been vocal, particularly since the death of your brother, who was shot to death by police. So give our viewers a little bit about who you are and how you came to be.
Okay. Again, thank you for having me on the show. Big fan of BronxNet TV. So I have watched a few shows, but years ago, but I'm glad to be back on BronxNet TV. My name's Natacha Pannell, and I pronounce it as Natasha because no one ever pronounces my name right, but it's actually pronounced Natasha Pannell. And yes, at the age of 13, unfortunately and tragically, I lost my brother, who was Philip Pannell. He was shot in the back with his hands up in the air by Teaneck police officer Gary Spath. And in that moment, 31 years ago, I didn't decide that I was going to become an activist. I kind of sort of was thrust into this whole whirlwind, if you will, of social justice activism and just, you know, fighting for justice for my brother, fighting for to humanize him and things like that, all in trying to grieve from the loss of my brother. So it was a bit much for me to experience at the age of 13, because I was still like in my early stages of puberty and trying to find out myself as an individual and things like that. So I really had a hard time at that time with figuring out like which way my life was going to go. And when it happened, and knowing that I was never going to see my brother again, I decided within like an instant that I was going to find out why he wasn't coming home with my mother and I that evening, and why this had to happen to him. And so I told myself that I would either become a police officer or lawyer, a judge or politician, you know, and just 31 years later, I've been kind of fulfilling that hope or that dream, so to speak.
Yeah. Walk me through a little bit of the emotional, because when you talk about reliving your brother's death, you look at George Floyd, you look at Ahmaud Arbery, you look at Eric Garner, you look at all these people who have subsequently died since then at the hands of police, with the exception of Ahmaud Arbery there. But when you look and you see these things happen, how much does it relive inside of you?
Wow, that's a powerful question. I mean, I would say that for the past 31 years, it's been like myself and my mom and my family in general just been reliving the whole experience. Every time that there's a police shooting or a police brutality case or police corruption case, it's just a constant reminder of what happened to myself and my family. And it's unfortunate because even before Philip Pannell, there were other cases. There was Randy Evans, I believe, and Clifford Glover that were shot and killed by police officers in New York City. Nicholas Hayward Jr. was shot 4 years later. So my depiction or interpretation of Philip Pannell, it was before Philip Pannell, and then thereafter Philip Pannell, there are countless cases, and I've been able to meet with some of the families, and some of the families I feel for, because the fight for justice is never over. And I say that because of the system, the structural violence, and the system that we face. 9 times out of 10, the police are not held accountable, and that's wrong. They have qualified immunity. They have so many things that supports their negligence, that it's not even funny. And for the families, it's so hard for us to actually grieve when we're fighting for justice and we're trying to figure out why did it happen, and trying to prevent it from happening to other families. So it's just a constant fight, and I feel like I've been in the fight for 31 years.
And when you talk about that fight for justice, obviously a quest for answers. You want to know why. And for those that don't know, your brother was shot in the back. His hands was up. Yeah. And so very innocently, you can ask the question, how does someone get shot in the back with their hands up? And I know that's the question of your family. That's been the question of those across the tri-state area when the incident actually occurred. But share with me a little bit about what it was like for you in that quest to try to get answers and running up against that brick wall.
Well, it's years later, so I don't mind talking about the case, or what have you. Like the case itself, just trying to prove that my brother's hands were up in the air and that he was actually shot in the back, which are the facts. You can't deny that. As far as the system is concerned, and myself and my mom and my family trying to get answers as to why it happened, we'll probably never know unless the police officers themselves come out and say, like, listen, I made a mistake, or I shot him because XYZ. During that time, before the trial, the system is so corrupt in a sense because my brother's hands were up in the air, and when your hands are raised up in the air, your shoulder blades raise. And so when your shoulder blades raise, then that constitute, that your arms are in an upward position. So that evening that my brother was killed, either that evening or within that week, his body was shipped down to Washington, D.C., and they tried to reconstruct where the bullet entered his body. So they actually chiseled away bone and cut away cartilage from my brother's body just to reconstruct where the bullet entered. And we found that out later because the first trial, Officer Gary Spath was acquitted. And then the Attorney General found out that this actually happened, that this occurred, and that he was like, this is not gonna blow over easily. And then there was a second indictment, and then the second indictment is when he was indicted for, I believe, second-degree manslaughter. And that's when we actually went to trial, and it came out that what I just described, that it actually happened that way, and that, like after everything came out, it was proven that my brother's hands were up in the air. So that was one of the reliefs that both my mother and my family had and knowing that my brother was surrendering, for his life. But the fact that his life was taken, we've never to this day have understood why or even received answers as to why.
Yeah. I want to take a quick break. And coming up after the break, I want to talk about your platform, what you're fighting for, what you like to see happen. Because behind this tragedy, as I said, you turn pain into purpose. And there's a purpose that you're now fighting for even more vocally. And so let's talk about that when we return right here on Perspectives. We're taking a quick break. We'll be back with Natasha right after this. Welcome back to Perspectives. Daren Jaime here with you. Our guest, Natasha Pannell. She's been sharing with us a little bit about her quest for social justice and change and reform, particularly following the death of her brother, Philip Pannell, who was shot tragically and killed by New Jersey police, later proven that his hands were up as police fired that shot. We talked about that in the first segment. But Natasha, let me bring you back in and talk a little bit about where we are today. Because with that, the pain, with that, seeing the system, with that going through, I know you said it before, you don't want to see another family go through that. And you've actually been very vocal on the front lines, Black Lives Matter rallies, things of that sort, making your voice heard, and the call for police reform. So when we look at police reform right now, from your perspective, what is it that you like to see particularly happen in your area?
Well, definitely for one, the George Floyd bill, that act needs to be passed immediately, because it's something that's it's needed, it's warranted, because it's so many cases. Like I said, there's so many other Philip Pannells that has happened since 1990. And now that we're in 2021, it's just, to me, it blows my mind because of the fact that all of these police officers are getting away with taking innocent lives. And then that's just it. I mean, the innocent lives and the victims are just gone and no one's held accountable or anything like that. And that should not be. Money cannot bring our relatives back, but rightfully so. There should be some accountability for the families. And if it's in a monetary value, saying that, okay, the state or this public servant, if you will, was negligent and we owe the family XYZ, then so be it. But physically, the person that actually committed the act should be held accountable, which is the officers, so that's why I continue to fight, 31 years later.
And in New York, we passed 50A, and that was allowing the public to actually have an opportunity to see the disciplinary record of an officer. Talk to us about that and how that's actually transcended for you, what you'd like to see, because you're basically out of New Jersey, but share with us a little bit about New Jersey and where they stand.
Okay, well, right now, currently, New Jersey has about maybe 8 bills that are just sitting and legislation. And when I say just sitting, it's the process. So the bills, before it actually becomes a bill, it has to go before the assembly, and then from the assembly, it has to go to the Senate, and then from the Senate, it has to go to the governor's office, and then to the House. So that's kind of how the bills work. And right now, I just currently, or recently rather, testified back in March for the CCRB bill, which is the Civilian Review Board bill. And it will, if it's passed, because they kind of watered it down. They took the CCRB bill and then they modified it into something that's saying, okay, well, we're not going to give you all this, but we'll give you this. And this is what we feel that bill should look like. And so back in March, I did testify. I shared my story. And the fact of the matter that if it was a community civilian complaint board, review board, back then perhaps my brother would still be alive. So basically, the CCRB bill, it will grant like civilians to be able to have some sort of subpoena power against police officers who act in a negligent way. They will also, like you just mentioned, the bill in New York that was passed, they'll be able to see the police officers' records because 9 times out of 10, they don't just, kill a person. They've had like a history, thank you, of these actions. Like Derek Chauvin, before he killed George Floyd, he had like 20 something, complaints or incidents. And before Gary Spath shot and killed my brother, he's also had several incidents where he pulled out his weapon or he acted in a negligent way. And if there was a CCRB bill back in 1990, or even now, in place, because I think Newark, New Jersey had a CCRB bill, and then they took it away. They took the power away, the subpoena power, and they kind of watered it down, if you will. And then there's the police transparency bill. There's the police body camera bill, where all police officers in New Jersey should have to wear body cams and things like that. So New Jersey right now, we are working towards police reform, but it's not an easy task because 9 times out of 10, the police, for some reason, has this whole, what the word I'm looking for? That right, a protection for them. That's not even funny. It's like really, really bizarre the way police officers are able to kill and slain individuals and get away with it.
And when you watch these other occurrences, obviously it does something to you. We talked about that earlier about really reliving it and it playing out again. But talk to me about what kind of response you've gotten from legislators, I should say, after talking about this and bringing this to pass. Because what I find to be the history is we can have good testimony, we can testify, there's a listening session, there's a lot of nodding of heads, but at the end, there's no writing with the pen.
Right. Yeah. So that's pretty much what's been happening. I say kudos to Senator Loretta Weinberg, who's actually retiring this year, but she did kind of push towards the police transparency bill, and she's fighting for that. She's endorsed that to be passed into law, whereas the police, their records and things like that would have to be open to public record, and not sealed, if you will. And even as a senator, she's been getting some pushback. So it's not, like I said, I continue to say it's not an easy task to fight towards the injustices that's happening, to kind of eliminate it altogether,
Yeah. Let me take a quick break. I want to come back and talk more with you. And we've got another segment, so stay with us right here on Perspectives. And we're back here on Perspectives. Daren Jaime with you. Our guest, Natacha Pannell. She is an activist. She's one who's actually raising her voice and making her voice heard across the tri-state area, across the United States, really for social justice reform, criminal justice reform, more particularly, particularly following the death of her brother. And I want to talk to you about what we talked in the last segment, where we shared a lot about legislation and reform and really trying to see it go across that desk, not happening fast enough. And I know it's not happening as fast as you'd like it to happen. So I know that you've taken matters into your own hands and are actually running for office.
Yes, I am. So I like to coin the phrase as I'm going from protest to policy. I've always, within the past like 10 years, and even when I was younger, that 13-year-old girl, like I said, I always wanted to make things right, quote unquote, or I've always wanted to prevent this from happening to another sister or brother, because of how I felt back then, and so I said, okay, I decided to go to take the LSTAT exam about a year ago. Didn't do as well as I expected to do. So I'm still contemplating on that, because I've met throughout the past 5 years in protests and rallies and within the movement, I've met 5 people who actually went to law school in their late 40s and early 50s. So I'm right now in my mid 40s. I have a 22-year-old son. So I'm just like, should I go to law school or shouldn't I go? So they was like, oh yeah, you're never too old to go to school. You're never too old to go to law school. So I still have that in the back of my mind. And it won't do anything but help me, and my plight and what I'm doing. So I have that. And then right now I'm running for a New Jersey Assemblywoman for the 37th District. And the 37th District consists of 13 towns within Bergen County, and Teaneck being one of them. So I'm really excited about that. I've been learning a lot about the political realm, what it takes and what it doesn't take, and what you should do and what you shouldn't do, and what you should say and what you shouldn't say. So it's just, it's a lot going on in my life right now. But like I said, to me, I feel like I've kind of been through the storm. So it's like, what next? It's
Right.
not, it's not something that I'm like, okay, well, I can't do it. I actually feel in my heart that I can actually win this,
Yeah.
and I'm running as an independent. Excuse me. I'm running as an independent, which is even harder.
Right. But listen, independents can win. And we definitely know that one vote, one person, and votes matter. So if you got the right amount of votes, anything could happen. But I want to talk about advocacy for a minute, because that's what you've done. You've spent a lot of time really in the area of advocacy, but that advocacy is really centered on policy and wanting to have policy effectiveness. And so being a person, if elected, to really be able to handle policy and move policy, what would that mean for you?
Wow. That would be, I would feel like I finally have the leverage to be like, okay, no more. Enough is enough. I think Jane Elliott was saying, it's not enough is enough. Enough is, when you say enough is enough, that means that it's already too much, for us and for everyone. It's almost like a trickling down effect. I feel like if we don't stop this now, that it's going to affect, it's going to continue to affect like Black and brown families, as well as the rich. It's going to be a trickling down effect where it's going to start affecting everyone. So I feel like if I do happen to win, I would be one of those people or individuals who are in a position to be not only transparent, but I'll be in a position to be like, okay, well, I know what it is to be on the other side. And I can be reasonable, I can be subjective, and then I also can be fair, and allow things to happen and flow where everyone, comes out on the other side and feel safe,
Yeah. And so as we get ready to draw down, I just want to share a little bit more about what you do. I know that there's a foundation in your brother's name as well.
Yes, the Philip Pannell Foundation. I just formally stepped down as the president. So My mom is now the president of the foundation. And the mission of the Philip Pannell Foundation is to raise public consciousness and bring awareness to prevent senseless acts of violence in America. And we really feel that, my mom's standpoint, she would say that she started the foundation so that no other mother can experience what she's experienced, and then that she can help other mothers who have experienced. Because unfortunately, there are thousands of cases of police brutality that you and I never even heard of. So I've met over hundreds of families whose cases has never was able to get media attention, who, like I said, you would probably never hear of, unless you're in that world. And this is a world that no one, I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy. No one wants to be a part of this world.
Yeah, we got a little bit under a minute left, but I just want to be able to ask you a question before we wrap up. What message do you have for people who have been through what you've been through or are experiencing what you've been through? And what message would you give them in order to navigate the process?
I would say make sure that you know what you're getting into, and allow yourself a moment to breathe and to grieve, because that's really important. Many of us, we feel like, okay, we want to just continue to fight. We can't get our loved ones back. So we're going to make sure that the world knows, or that these people know that took the innocent life of our loved one, that it wasn't right. So if that's the case, I would say to keep on with the good fight, keep on continuing to fight, but just allow yourself a moment to breathe, and to kind of do some self introspection, and to know that self-care is just as important as fighting for justice.
Natasha Pannell, we got to leave it there, but thank you for taking the time, sharing your story, sharing your passion, and now your purpose. And so thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
All righty. Well, that about wraps it up for another edition of Perspectives. I am Daren Jaime. Of course, we thank you for watching. The key is to be engaged. And what Natasha teaches us all is that you can take a bad, turn it into better by turning that pain into purpose. All of us have a purpose. We just have to find out what exactly it is. So, listen, we're going to have another Perspectives next week. You come back and join us. Thank you for watching. Until the next time, I'm Daren Jaime saying take care. God bless. We'll see you soon.
Relevant to life, you bring it to the table. Whether you make a move solo or a movement with a stable. No fables, you speak on your decisions. Cause in the long run, it's your voice, your views, your vision. Keeping it real with many messages for you to know. This ain't radio, but DJ runs the show. Entertainment, he rocks it. Politics, he locks it. The host with the most would handle any topic. Don't forget to share your perspective, which shines a light.